Now I am become Wrath, the destroyer of worlds.
We have arrived at the far limit of the world. These are the Scythian mountains, desolate and vast. Hephaestus, you must carry out the Father's will and bind the criminal to this steep-looming rock with chains of adamant, unbreakable. It was your flower he stole, the bright and dancing fire, and gave its wonder-working power to mortals. This is the crime for which he now must pay the price to all the gods, that he may learn to love the tyranny of Zeus and quit his friendship with the human race. By the same power that holds you captive, I'm going to forge you to this barren cliff, alone, far from all human company, with metal bonds impossible to break. No mortal voice or form will bring you solace. Scorched by the sun, your skin will lose its bloom. You will be glad when night descends, draping her gaudy cloak around the day, and glad when dawn dispels the morning frost. Thus, at all times, one torment or another will plague you. Your rescuer is not yet born. This is the fruit of your philanthropy. A god, you scorn the anger of the gods by granting mortals honor above their due. For that you will keep vigil on this rock, upright, unsleeping, and never bend a knee. And many a groan will pass your lips, and sighing and bitter lamentation, all in vain. Prometheus, himself a god, steals the treasure of fire from the gods and gifts it to humans. Zeus, the father and ruler of the gods, orders his children to bind Prometheus to a desolate rock as punishment for his indiscretion. Being immortal, he's condemned to hold an eternal vigil and suffer the consequences of his choice. Fire, though it grants illumination and makes the crafting of tools possible, also consumes and destroys. It is, to reference another Greek myth, a Pandora's box, or to use our modern lexicon, a double-edged blade, and responsible adults will let children play with neither fire nor blades. But Prometheus equips men with fire despite the danger. His reasoning is laid out in another ancient story from another ancient culture, one Robert Oppenheimer was intimately familiar with, and one that most people viewing the movie are sadly likely to have missed. The Bhagavad Gita, which is the same Sanskrit text shown and quoted in the movie.
Oppenheimer's quote when they detonated the nuclear bomb is one of my favorite quotes ever.
What did he say?
He said he quoted the Bhagavad Gita. He said, "I am become death, destroyer of worlds."
There was a black guy named Earl Charles who was there when it happened, and he has a famous quote from that very moment. He said, "Shut up." What are you talking about?
Narrates the story of Prince Arjuna's inner conflict and turmoil in the moments leading up to battle between the two sides of the family. It recounts the dialogue between the prince and his trusted charioteer, Krishna, who turns out to be an avatar and incarnation of the Hindu god Vishnu. In the dialogue, Arjuna is shown to be dejected. He doesn't wish to fight his cousins. He tells Krishna/Vishnu, "Krishna, halt my chariot between the armies, far enough for me to see these men who lust for war, ready to fight with me in the strain of battle. I see men gathered here eager to fight, bent on serving the folly of Dhritarashtra's son. Krishna, I see my kinsmen gathered here, wanting war. My limbs sink, my mouth is parched, my body trembles, the hair bristles on my flesh, my skin burns. I cannot stand still, my mind reels. I see omens of chaos, Krishna. I see no good in killing my kinsmen in battle. Krishna, I seek no victory or kingship or pleasures. What use to us are kingship, delights, or life itself? We sought kingship, delights, and pleasures for the sake of those assembled to abandon their lives and fortunes in battle. They are teachers, fathers, sons, and grandfathers, uncles, grandson, fathers and brothers of wives, and other men of our family. I do not want to kill them, even if I am killed, Krishna, not for the kingship of all three worlds, much less for the earth." The quote, "Now I am become death," is most often misconstrued. Oppenheimer isn't referring to himself, drunk on power, as the destroyer. Rather, he's wrestling with the terrifying aspect of the god Vishnu, commanding him to fulfill his duty. In the Bhagavad Gita, Vishnu, in the guise of Krishna, gives Arjuna a sermon to persuade him to fight his kin despite his misgivings. Arjuna is not convinced, and the sermon veers into a dialogue. "We don't know which way is worse to bear, our conquering them or their conquering us," says the prince. Confronted with the task of extinguishing the lives of his fellow men, he is questioning his beliefs and his resolve. We will not want to live if we killed the sons assembled before us. The flaw of pity blights my very being. Conflicting sacred duties confound my reason. I ask you to tell me decisively, which is better? In the movie, Robert Oppenheimer is plagued with more than one crippling dilemma. The building of the atom bomb, whether to go on his campaign against a nuclear arms race at the risk of his credibility, his relationship with Jane and his marriage, and whether to fight back in the losing battle in opposition to the case laid against him. The latter two are dilemmas the average person could be faced with, but the first is singularly potent, and in fact is anything but sure in his own mind. He has to create a weapon that would kill thousands when used once. And who's to say how many times it would be used? Perhaps it would burn down the entire world. But what if the Nazis built the bomb first? The outcome will be far more catastrophic and more certain. What about after the Germans surrendered? Would it be a reasonable trade-off to use the bomb to end the war and risk putting fire into later unworthy hands? Oppenheimer is called the Sphinx-like guru of the atom, referencing his mystical air, his uncertainty, and his outward ambiguity. Nobody knows what he believes, and he himself, like Arjuna, is, to borrow the text phrasing, blighted by the flaw of pity and confounded by conflicting sacred duties. When he's asked whether he has any moral scruples about his creation of the bomb, his choosing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki as the targets, and the consequent deaths of over 200,000 people, he replies, terrible ones. In the beginning of the movie, Oppenheimer is shown to be assailed by visions. Before the bomb, they're visions of the quantum world. After, they're replaced with visions of blinding flashes, burning skin, suffering and screaming people affected by radiation and other terrible consequences of his creation. Unlike most other humans, Oppenheimer's mind occupies more than just the physical plane. Part of him exists constantly in the metaphysical plane of his guilt. The clamor of his brilliant mind renders the intensity with which he feels guilt much more severe. Oppenheimer is not only Prometheus, but also Atlas. He bears the burden of the heavens so that we won't have to. Don't yield to impotence, is Krishna's reply to Arjuna's dilemma. It is unnatural in you. And finally, in order to prove his point, the god appears to the prince in his true form, saying the famous words.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Contrary to his command to unleash destruction, Vishnu is in fact the god of preservation, which hints to the terrible principle that sometimes to preserve, one will have to destroy. In the epic-making moment, the god also appears to Robert Oppenheimer, seeing the action through. Oppenheimer is not a saint. He wasn't a callous man who wished for power and destruction. He's a man who was confronted with an unfathomable dilemma, who made an endlessly difficult choice and bore the judgment and suffering thereafter. He is J. Robert Oppenheimer, the Sphinx-like guru of the atom, the man who stole fire from the gods, and we are beholden to him.